This video is all about how to fund the development of a new product idea. Now, product design, prototyping, sourcing manufacturers, initial marketing research, all of that costs money. Not everyone has that kind of money to spend on a new project, and therefore quite a lot of people need to raise funds in order to develop an idea. Now, I've worked with hundreds of clients across a range of different industry sectors, a lot of whom have had to raise money in order to develop ideas. I've also raised over £500,000 myself to launch our own product idea. So make sure you keep watching to the end of this video, because I'll be sharing some of my experiences and my stories along the way to help give you the best chance of successfully funding your new product development. So let's get started straight away. Funding a new product idea can be split down into 4 different categories that we're going to cover in this video. Now, the first is grant funding, the second is investment, the third is crowdfunding, and the fourth is loan capital. So let's start at the top with grant funding. There is still grant funding available. The main source of new product development funding is provided through Innovate UK. They are the government's provider for a lot of the funding money around innovative, risky new product development. And the level of risk is a key element in those applications, and it is critical to you being able to actually access one of those grants. Now, we've been through the application process 4 or 5 times with various clients. None of them have been successful yet, and that is because actually it is highly competitive, and also it is because a lot of the Innovate UK grant competitions are very specific around things like sustainable energy products or that kind of thing, and so actually you can't always access every grant funding pot with your specific idea. Now, the application process is quite extensive. You will need quite a detailed business case, but the funding that's available is up to £500,000, and obviously therefore is potentially well worth having and putting the effort into applying for. But please do bear in mind it is incredibly difficult actually to get. Now, it is worth saying that a lot of our clients have been successful with smaller, more local grant funds. We're working with a client at the moment who got a £50,000 grant from a local fund close to her. So do visit your local growth hubs, do talk to your local Chamber of Commerce, and just do a general Google search for development grants, product development grants in your local area, and see if there's something close to you that therefore you could access and use. Now, the third thing to say is there are also specific grants for particular industry sectors. So if you're doing something specifically, for example, in oil and gas, it's worth looking at what funding is available for specific product development in that sector. So that's my best advice in terms of trying to get some grant funding for your idea. It is often best to get the initial stages of development done, because you simply cannot complete the application and answer all the questions unless you have had some product development done and you do know, therefore, some of the answers to things around what technology you're developing, how much it's going to cost to complete the development, and in some cases, how much your unit cost might be and what margin you might be able to make. If you have to create a business case around your grant application, then inevitably you're going to have some development done and some commercial viability work. And my team specialise in helping companies and individuals and startups in that early stage with that initial feasibility work. Do get in touch for more details on that. Let's move on to the second on the list, investment. Now, this really is where you give up a percentage share of your future revenue and of your business and your idea in return for capital in the early stages in order to develop the idea and move it forward. Now, what often happens is you give up a larger percentage for a smaller amount of money at the beginning, but when you're further down the line and you've got something where you've eliminated a lot of the risks, it's much more developed and ready to go, then at that stage you can give up less equity for larger amounts of money. Now, early on, what we've generally found through working with hundreds of different clients is that friends and family normally are your best bet to invest in an early stage startup where it's high risk. Really what they're doing is backing you. Later on, it's worth talking to more angel investors, maybe even some investor groups who are prepared to put larger amounts of money in, but will only really do that when they see that you've got the project to a certain stage. Now, the critical thing here really is about getting investment ready. And that really means getting your business plan sorted. That means forming your company. And the best tip that I've got in terms of raising investment this way is through registering for the government's SCIS scheme, which basically means that the risk for an investor at this early stage is halved, i.e. if they put in £50,000, if the whole thing goes pop, then actually they can offset £25,000 roughly of that against future tax liability, and therefore their overall risk obviously is significantly reduced. But you really need to get your business plan, your company formation done, that application in, so that you are looking much more investable, much more credible than simply going down the pub with someone and saying, I've got an idea, would you mind giving me some money for it? You really need to build it as a business case and then go and present it as such to potential investors that you know within your network. Now, the third option for funding your idea is crowdfunding, and this really splits into two. There are things like Crowdcube, which is an equity crowdfunding model. So again, you're giving up a percentage stake in your company in return for money in. But generally what happens with crowdfunding through a platform like Crowdcube is you will end up with, say, 300 investors, all maybe putting in £500 to £1,000 on average. So they're all spreading their risk across a wide range of projects, and you're ending up with a larger number of investors putting in smaller amounts of money. And that can have its advantages. If the whole thing, again, doesn't work out as expected, you haven't got any one individual who's losing large amounts of money. Now, all of these platforms have a whole entry process. Normally you need to get to a stage where you have a good prototype, where you have a video of that prototype being used, and where you have a detailed business plan, including projections for future sales and revenue, and an idea of your unit cost for your product as well. So you actually have to get quite far in terms of product development, really to be able to create the necessary material to then go on one of these platforms and try and use it to raise money. Now, the other type of crowdfunding is a pre-order based system. Kickstarter is probably the most well-known platform that does this. And effectively what you're saying to people is, pre-order my product, buy it now at a discount, normally around 30%, and then I will use all that money raised from pre-orders to produce the manufacturing tooling, make the first batch, and then bring them in, normally from the Far East where most things are manufactured, and then send them out to all of these people who have bought my product early on. Now, you don't give up any equity in this model, and all of those people take the risk that actually something goes wrong and they never get the product. And that's why you're giving them a discount, is because they're supporting you early on and they're taking a shared risk. Now, one of the challenges is, in order to get on one of these platforms and be credible, again, you have to have quite an advanced prototype, you have to have a video of it working, you have to have unit costs from the manufacturer so you can work out how much you're going to charge for your pre-orders and still make money. And so again, you have to be very developed in terms of your overall product development journey in order to be able to use this effectively to fund your idea. But if you have a product that requires quite a lot of tooling, actually this can be a really good thing to do, because you can raise a lot of the funds that otherwise you have to put in yourself to get the thing manufactured and over the line. It is worth bearing in mind that if you launch your crowdfunding campaign too early, you can end up with a huge number of backers who are all pestering you for their product and can get quite irate when you don't deliver. So often what we would suggest is that you have everything set up, ready to press go on production, you have confirmed timelines from your manufacturer, and then you launch this type of pre-order crowdfunding campaign. Now, the fourth type of funding we're looking at in this video is funding through loan capital. I would suggest that you never ever fund your startup using loans. Now, there's two reasons for this. One is that eventually, obviously, you're going to have to start paying back those loans, or you're going to start paying interest potentially immediately, and that puts a huge financial burden on the company month after month after month, and you could get to a stage where actually that puts the business under, whereas if you hadn't taken the loans, you might be able to keep the business going a bit longer in order to build up the sales volume or get to a point where you can get some more investment. The other problem with loan capital is that actually investors further down the line really don't like the business owing money on loans. Various reasons for this, but it puts off future investors, and that's a critical thing to avoid doing. Now, I said that I would share some of my experience in terms of raising capital. So I raised £500,000 for our pushchair project, and that was through investors. So I set the business up, I built a team which gave the business much more credibility. I found some non-exec directors who had industry experience. We developed the product to a point where we had prototypes and manufacturer lined up, unit costs, and we could build a business plan around all of that. And then I went and presented it to friends and family, and I presented it in a special way. I didn't say, I need you to invest, or I want you to give me some money. I went to them and said, look, I've got this presentation for a potential business. I'd like your advice. I'd like to know what you think of the presentation. I'd like your feedback so that I can make it better before I go to other investors. Now, what happened was the first person I actually presented it to turned around and said, well, actually, I'd like to invest. I was only asking for advice at that point. I wasn't asking for money. I was slightly taken aback, to be honest. And in the end, that investment didn't go through. He decided to purchase a property instead. But it gave me huge confidence that actually what I was presenting was investable. And then the second investor meeting that I went to was a wealthy individual who I'd met a year before, who'd sold out his business and was looking to actively invest in some new startup companies. And we secured a six-figure investment from him, which gave the business obviously a huge boost. And from there, what I did was find as many other investors as possible. So I spoke to all of my professional network. I spoke to the solicitor that I'd used for our initial shareholders agreement. I spoke to my accountant. I spoke to everyone I knew in business in the local area with two questions. Are you looking for potential investment opportunities at the moment, given that the interest rate with the banks is so poor? Are you looking for something else to do with your money? And then my second question was, if you're not, who else do you know in your network who might be? And through that, actually, we got a huge network of investors who we could go and speak to. Now, it didn't suit everyone, and this is a big piece of advice with getting investment. Investors often invest in what they know. So if they've come out of a retail background, then they're more likely to invest in a retail business. If they come out of a mother and baby background, then they're more likely to invest in a pushchair. So I spent quite a lot of time trying to find people in the mother and baby industry, or who had left the mother and baby industry, who had made quite a lot of money, because I knew they'd know the market better. They'd feel more comfortable with this type of business, and they'd be more likely to invest in this business as well. I also spent quite a lot of time simply looking for investors on LinkedIn and various other social media platforms by simply typing in investor and seeing whose profiles came up that had that in the description, and basically cold approaching them. And surprisingly, I got a few meetings out of that as well. So there's just some tips there from my own journey about how you can look to raise investment for your project. I would suggest that you try all of the above methods as part of an overall investment strategy, with the exception of taking loans. I would not take loans to fund a startup business for the reasons I described earlier. And if you want more information about why not, check out this video straight away, which makes it very clear why loan capital is a very bad way to fund a startup.